Well, hello. Welcome to our continuing devotional. Currently, we're going through the book of Colossians, and we're in Colossians chapter 2. We're looking at verses 16 and 17, which say this: Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or Sabbath. These are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. In the next few verses, these verses and beyond, the Apostle Paul is going to be warning these Christians about some dangerous sidetrack ways of thinking, some teachings that don't line up with Christianity, but seem to on the surface. One of those teachings, or one of those side ways that Christians can go sideways, is what we call legalism, and that's what he addresses here. Now let's make sure we understand what legalism is. Legalism is focusing on adhering to a certain set of external behaviors or a certain set of external religious activities in order to be accepted and blessed by God. It's not just saying there are behaviors and activities we should engage in and that would be right. That's a perfectly Christian thing to focus on. But when we combine these moral behaviors, these spiritual activities as a means or a way to be accepted by God, to be blessed by God, then we've crossed over into legalism, because now, instead of our relationship being based upon what Jesus has done, it's based upon what we do. And that's what Paul's concern is here. They were focusing on, at least being pressured to focus on keeping various Old Testament rules about kosher food, clean and unclean, about certain festivals and activities, like the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the Feast of Passover, the new moons, which were various sacrifices were made, the Sabbath. There were many Sabbaths, including the weekly Sabbath time. And he wants them to understand that this is not the basis on which God relates to you. Let no one pass judgment on you, whether on how well you do these things, or if you're doing these things at all. They were external. They weren't meant to be how we relate to God today. They were pictures. They were pictures, as he says. They were shadows, he says here in verse 17, which a shadow means they were a picture of a spiritual truth or a spiritual reality. They pictured the sacrifice of Christ. They pictured what it means to separate ourselves in holiness from the world. They picture what it means to rest, Sabbath rest in Jesus and the work that he has done, to rest from our own efforts and our own merit. And I don't have time to go into all of that in this short devotional, but the point here is those Old Testament rituals and regulations and food laws were simply a picture or a shadow of things that were to come. In the same way that when a woman is pregnant, her and her husband may get an ultrasound picture of the baby, and it shows them some truth about the baby. Often it reveals the gender of the baby. But you don't, once the baby is born, you don't stare at that picture. You don't talk to that picture, that ultrasound picture. You don't hug it, because it was just a shadow that showed you what lay ahead. Now that you have the baby, you talk to the baby. You stare at the baby. You hug the baby. You relate and interact with the baby, because you now have the full life in front of you. And I hope that doesn't seem like an odd illustration, but that's basically what Paul is saying here. You have Jesus. He's the life. He's what those other things pictured. That's why verse 17 says the substance belongs to Christ. Now everything's about Jesus. And anything that points us to Jesus, to think about Jesus, to speak to Jesus, to listen to Jesus, to follow Jesus, to emulate Jesus, then we're on the right track. But all these other things can be a huge distraction and hindrance in our Christian walk. So be very careful that you don't get sidetracked. Because even today, I do meet Christians who get all caught up in these kosher food laws. They get caught up in various Old Testament rituals, and they lose focus on Christ, which is what it's really all about. I trust that you will focus on Jesus and understand that our entire relationship with God is based upon what he has done and not what you and I do. Have a blessed day.